Beloved brothers and sisters in Christ, there are moments in life where the weight becomes unbearable. You pray, you cry, you break down in silence, wondering if anyone sees, if anyone hears. You carry burdens on your shoulders that no one else understands, the worries of tomorrow, the failures of yesterday, the pressure of today. And in the quiet corners of your heart, anxiety grows like a storm cloud. Worry blinds you to the divine solutions already in motion. It steals your sight, your spiritual perception, your ability to discern what God is already doing on your behalf. When you become consumed with worry, your eyes focus only on the problem, not the possibility. Your heart becomes filled with fear instead of faith, and in that state, you miss the quiet, powerful work that God is already performing behind the curtain of your life. Worry narrows your vision to what is seen, while faith widens it to what is promised. You begin to measure the future based on your current struggle, not God's eternal strategy. What you perceive as a delay might already be a completed work in heaven, waiting for its appointed moment to manifest on earth. God is not reactive, He is proactive. He doesn't scramble to respond to your needs when you start to panic. He has already gone ahead of you. He has already seen your tears, heard your heart, and prepared provision. But worry places blinders over your soul. It causes you to question what is already settled. It makes you doubt the process that has already been divinely authored. You start to believe that unless you can see movement, there is no progress. You assume that silence equals inactivity, but God's movements are not always loud. His hands are not always visible. He works in the shadows, in the silence, in the slow unfolding of time. When you worry, you begin to operate in your own strength. You try to force outcomes, fix what's broken, and figure out what only God can explain. You reach for answers without consulting the answer. You rely on your logic, your plans, your resources, and your influence. And the more you try to control, the more things seem to spin out of control. Worry traps you in the realm of human limitation, where everything depends on what you can do. But the divine solutions are never about what you can do. They are about what God has already done. He has already authored your escape, mapped out your breakthrough, scheduled your restoration. Imagine walking into a room filled with darkness. Your natural instinct is to reach for the light switch. But what if you forget there is a switch altogether? You fumble in the dark, knock things over, hurt yourself trying to navigate blindly. That is what worry does to your soul. It disconnects you from the source of clarity and light. It makes you forget that the switch, the faith to trust, is right there. You don't have to create the light. You just have to turn it on. The room was never designed to remain dark. The power was always flowing. The source was always connected, but until you flip the switch, you live as if the solution doesn't exist. Worry focuses on what if. Faith focuses on even if. Worry imagines worst-case scenarios and builds emotional prisons around them. Faith sees the size of the storm, but remembers the authority of the one who speaks to it. Divine solutions are not always logical, but they are always timely. And when you allow worry to dominate your thoughts, you miss the divine timing that is unfolding in perfection. The door you've been waiting to open may already have a key in it. The healing you've been longing for may already be making its way into your life. But worry keeps your eyes closed, your hands clenched, your heart guarded. There is nothing more exhausting than trying to fix what God has already finished. You keep circling the same fears, repeating the same doubts, and asking the same questions. But what if the answer is already waiting in your future? What if it's not that God is taking too long, but that your worry is slowing your ability to recognize what He's already done? You cannot walk in both fear and faith at the same time. One will always silence the other. Worry blocks you from hearing the still small voice that whispers, "It's already taken care of." Worry magnifies the mountain and minimizes the miracle. It makes you believe the enemy has more power than your God. It tells you that your situation is permanent when heaven has already declared it temporary. It convinces you that your struggle defines you when God says your identity is rooted in victory. The divine solution may not look the way you expect. It might come through a door you weren't watching, a person you didn't anticipate, or a timeline you didn't choose. But that doesn't mean it's not already on its way. While you're panicking, heaven is preparing. While you're pacing the floor, angels are on assignment. While your mind races, God's plan is unfolding with precision. But if you let worry dominate your spirit, you won't see it. You'll be so focused on the mess that you miss the miracle. So preoccupied with the burden that you overlook the blessing taking shape just behind it. The solution is not coming. It's already been released. The breakthrough is not waiting for your fear to fade. It's waiting for your faith to rise. God's silence is not his absence. He works in the unseen. There are seasons when your prayers seem to echo into a void, where heaven feels distant and your soul wrestles with the question, is God even listening? In those moments, silence can feel like abandonment. But silence is not a sign that God is gone. It is often a sign that he is doing something deeper, something beyond your understanding, something eternal. Silence is not inactivity. It is divine strategy. When God is silent, he is shaping outcomes that your eyes cannot yet perceive. He is moving pieces in the background of your life, orchestrating connections, timing events, shifting hearts, aligning people, and preparing places for you. The human heart craves noise as a sign of reassurance. We equate words with presence. We assume that unless God is speaking constantly, he must not be near. But that is not how God operates. He is not like man, bound by human expectations or limited by emotional reassurances. His silence is not disinterest, it is divine focus. When you feel most alone, you may actually be closest to your breakthrough. The silence that surrounds you may be the stillness before the miracle. It may be the sacred quiet before the explosion of divine favor. God is not absent in your silence, he is at work in places you cannot see. When a seed is planted in the soil, it disappears from sight. There is no evidence of growth on the surface. It is buried, silent, still, but under the soil, something powerful is happening. The shell breaks, the root system begins to form, life starts to emerge. And when the time is right, the seed bursts through the surface, no longer hidden, now seen. That's how God often works in your life. The silence is the soil. It's not punishment, it's preparation. It's not delay. It's development. You may feel buried, overlooked, unheard, but you are actually being planted for purpose. What you perceive as God's distance is really his deep involvement in the soil of your destiny. In Scripture, we find countless examples of God working in silence. Joseph, betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery, endured years of silence. No voice from heaven, no prophetic reassurance. Just prison walls and the passing of time. But God was moving. He was positioning Joseph for a moment that would change the course of a nation. Esther, before she became queen, had no angelic visitation, no voice from the sky, but God placed her in the palace at the right moment to save an entire people. Jesus himself, between the crucifixion and the resurrection, lay silent in the grave. Heaven was quiet, but beneath the silence, the power of resurrection was already underway. What if the silence you are experiencing is not abandonment, but incubation? What if God is building something that can't be rushed? What if his silence is actually your protection, shielding you from premature exposure, keeping you hidden until the time is perfect? You don't need to hear him to know he is there. His word says he will never leave you nor forsake you. That promise does not depend on your feelings, your circumstances, or your ability to sense him. It is a covenant sealed by his nature, anchored in his faithfulness. The challenge is to remain faithful in the silence, to keep praying even when the answer hasn't come, to keep praising even when the breakthrough is unseen, to keep walking even when the direction feels unclear. That is the essence of trust, believing that God's hand is still guiding you even when you can't feel its grip. The enemy would love for you to equate silence with abandonment. He whispers lies that say, God has forgotten you, your prayers don't matter, you're wasting your time. But those are tactics meant to pull you away from the posture of trust. They are distractions designed to shift your focus from the eternal to the temporary. God's silence invites you into deeper dependence. It's where your faith matures, where your roots grow deeper, where your character is refined. The silence stretches you, humbles you, tests you, but it also strengthens you. It teaches you to hear God in new ways, not always in words, but in peace, in open doors, in divine delays that protect you from what you didn't even know was coming. The silence is not empty. It is filled with God's presence, woven with His promises, heavy with His glory. It is where warriors are made, where destinies are clarified, where your spirit learns to walk by faith and not by sight. Every problem has a pre-written divine answer. Nothing catches God off guard, and nothing in your life arrives without a purpose that heaven has already considered. Long before you faced the crisis, God authored the solution. Long before the sickness, the heartbreak, the loss, or the fear ever entered your life, the answer was already set in motion. This is not a reactive God who scrambles to rescue you once the storm begins. This is a sovereign God who planned redemption before pain, restoration before brokenness, and provision before need. In the eternal counsel of heaven, your life has been carefully written, and every chapter has been infused with answers already prepared for the trials you have yet to walk through. When you are in the midst of trouble, it's easy to forget that God does not wait for you to figure things out before He acts. His divine intelligence is not linear like human logic. He is not bound by time. He doesn't sit in heaven watching things unfold, wondering what to do next. Every problem that arises is something He already saw coming, and more importantly, something He has already resolved according to His will. The path you walk on is not random. Every detour, every delay, every unexpected twist has a divine answer embedded within it, waiting to be revealed at the right moment. Your faith is not in a God who is surprised by your circumstances, but in a God who has already made provision for them. The challenge for most people is that they cannot see the answer while the problem is still present. The pain feels more real than the promise. The fear screams louder than faith, but that is why trust becomes the key. You must trust that even though you can't see the way out, the way has already been made. You must believe that even though the waters are raging, the path through them has already been marked. This is the walk of faith, not pretending the problem doesn't exist, but believing that it doesn't have the final say. There is no such thing as a problem too complicated for God. There is no crisis so deep that it confuses Him. He sees the beginning from the end, and His word declares that all things work together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. Look at the stories throughout Scripture, and you will see this truth echoed again and again. When the people of Israel were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, it looked like the end, but God had already planned the sea to part. When the widow was down to her last meal, the answer was already walking toward her in the form of a prophet. When Lazarus lay dead in a tomb for 4 days, Jesus declared that it was not unto death, but for the glory of God. Even death was not a problem too great for God to solve. The resurrection was not a last-minute decision. It was the answer waiting in the background, ready to be revealed in God's perfect time. This understanding should shift how you approach life's challenges. Instead of panic, you begin to walk with confidence. Instead of despair, you hold on to expectation. You begin to say, I don't know how, but I know God has already made a way. This doesn't mean the road will be easy, but it means the road is never without purpose. Every hardship becomes a holy opportunity for the answer to be revealed. Every delay becomes a stage where God's glory can shine brighter. Your problems are not interruptions. They are intersections where heaven touches earth, where divine answers collide with human need. When you live with the assurance that the answer is already written, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes. You stop exhausting yourself trying to fix everything in your own strength. You stop running from difficulty and start seeking the presence of the one who already holds the blueprint. You start listening not for panic but for guidance, not for escape but for instruction. God is not limited by your options. He is not boxed in by your limitations. Where you see a wall, he sees a door. Where you see a loss, he sees an opportunity for restoration. Where you see failure, he sees a foundation for your next victory. The answer is never something you have to create. It is something you have to discover, something you receive through obedience, through prayer, through faith. Surrender brings peace that striving never will. There is a deep exhaustion that settles into the soul when a person tries to control what was never meant to be carried alone. Striving is rooted in the belief that everything depends on your effort, your strength, your planning, and your performance. It tells you that if you don't fix it, it won't be fixed, that if you don't make it happen, it won't happen. This constant pressure produces anxiety, restlessness, and weariness. But surrender is the sacred release of that pressure. It is not giving up, but giving over. It is the act of placing your situation in the hands of a God who already knows the end from the beginning. Surrender does not shrink your power, it connects it to divine strength. Peace does not come from having all the answers. Peace comes when you stop trying to be the answer. When you surrender, you stop wrestling with the unknown. You stop fighting battles in your mind that have already been won in the Spirit. You release the grip on the outcome and instead open your heart to trust. Striving says, I must keep pushing or I'll lose control. Surrender says, I was never in control, and that's where freedom begins. When you live in striving, your life becomes a series of attempts to fix, force, and figure out. When you live in surrender, your life becomes a rhythm of listening, yielding, and flowing with divine timing. There is nothing more liberating than knowing you don't have to carry it all. Surrender is the gateway to supernatural rest. The world tells you to hustle harder, to do more, to be more, but heaven whispers a different message. Be still and know. Striving is rooted in fear, but surrender is rooted in trust. Fear makes you clench your fists tighter. Trust teaches you to lift your hands higher, and when your hands are lifted, not to fight but to worship, something shifts. The chaos that once ruled your thoughts begins to quiet. The tension that wrapped itself around your heart begins to loosen. The voices of doubt begin to fade, and the voice of God begins to rise. Surrender is not weakness. It is the highest form of spiritual strength. It is choosing to rest in the sovereignty of God even when your circumstances feel unstable. It is saying, I don't see the way, but I know the waymaker. It is deciding that peace is more valuable than having control. It is learning to trust that God's timing is better than your timeline, that His plan is deeper than your logic, and that His ways are higher than your ways. Surrender allows you to experience peace that surpasses understanding, not because the situation is perfect, but because your posture has changed. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, facing the cross, He modeled the ultimate surrender. He prayed, not my will, but yours be done. That prayer was not a moment of defeat. It was a moment of divine alignment. In that surrender, the greatest victory in history was set in motion. Peace came not through avoiding the cross, but through surrendering to the purpose behind it. The same is true in your life. Some of the peace you seek will not come by avoiding the storm, but by surrendering to the one who speaks peace in the midst of it. The storm may not stop immediately, but your spirit will be anchored. The striving heart is never satisfied. It constantly searches for answers, affirmation, and assurance, but the surrendered heart finds rest even in the unknown. It is no longer tossed by every wave of doubt or fear. It is anchored in the truth that God is for you, that He is with you, and that He is working even when you don't see it. Surrender brings clarity. It simplifies what striving complicates. It brings alignment where there was resistance. It opens doors that striving could never touch, because those doors are not opened by force, they are opened by faith. You may have been trying to hold everything together on your own. You may have been striving to be strong for everyone else, to carry the weight of your future, your family, your finances, your purpose, but there is a better way. There is a path marked not by striving but by surrender. That path may not be easy, but it is filled with peace. It is filled with divine provision, with unexpected breakthroughs, with moments of grace you didn't earn, but were gifted because you stopped striving and started trusting. Peace is not found in knowing what's next. It's found in knowing who holds what's next. Worry often stems from a false sense of responsibility, the belief that everything depends on your actions, your timing, your solutions. But when you understand that you're not fighting for victory but from victory, your entire approach to life changes. Many battles we face are not there to crush us, but to remind us that God has already won. The path ahead is not about achieving something new, but about walking in what has already been secured. When you grasp this truth, anxiety loses its power because you're not striving to earn favor, you're living in the overflow of it. Just like a soldier who steps onto the field already knowing the enemy has been defeated, your confidence isn't in what you do, but in what has been done. God's word never said the weapons wouldn't form, it simply declared they wouldn't prosper. That means threats may arise, circumstances may shake, but the outcome is secure. When Jesus said it is finished, he meant it. Every chain you're worried about breaking has already been shattered at the cross. Every sickness, every heartbreak, every storm already overcome. But it's hard to see this victory when your eyes are fixed on the visible. That's why worry thrives where faith is weak. The enemy wants you consumed by what's going wrong, so you miss what God has already set right. When you feel overwhelmed, it's not because God hasn't moved, but because you haven't yet stepped into the assurance of his finished work. You were never called to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. That burden was nailed to a cross 2,000 years ago. You're not meant to constantly battle thoughts of failure, fear, or defeat. You are meant to walk boldly, speak confidently, and rest securely because the outcome was decided long before the battle ever began. God knew the end before you faced the beginning. That's why you're not fighting for victory, you're fighting from it. So often, we make the mistake of thinking God needs our help to complete what he already finished. But your effort doesn't earn his intervention, your belief activates it. It's not about how loud you pray, how long you fast, or how hard you work. It's about trusting that the same power that raised Christ from the dead is alive and active in your situation right now. That power doesn't need your panic, it needs your surrender. Because when you understand the war is already won, you start to walk differently, talk differently, even breathe differently. This mindset shift doesn't just change your spiritual life, it transforms your relationships, your career, your decisions. Instead of reacting to every problem with fear, you respond with peace. Instead of overthinking every outcome, you trust that the outcome is already covered. You stop begging for things that have already been promised. You stop chasing approval you already possess. When you know the victory is yours, you don't let temporary trials define your eternal truth. Walking from victory means you no longer see setbacks as defeats, but as detours that God uses to guide you. You no longer see closed doors as rejection, but as redirection. You no longer panic when things don't go your way because you trust that they are going God's way. The enemy can't steal what you refuse to surrender, and when you hold on to your peace, you keep the proof of your victory in hand. Every moment you stay calm under pressure, every time you worship in the storm, every decision you make without fear, it's a declaration that you know you are already victorious. This isn't arrogance, it's divine confidence. It's not pride, it's rooted in promise. You're not declaring you're strong on your own. You're acknowledging that you serve a God who never loses a battle. You are not the author of your breakthrough, He is. And because of that, the pressure is off. You're not performing for approval. You're walking in alignment with a destiny already designed. You're not fighting the same battles hoping for a different outcome. You're simply enforcing a verdict already passed in heaven. When God declares it done, no weapon, no word, no worry can undo it. This is why you don't need to panic, overthink, or lose sleep. You don't fight for victory. You fight from it when faith begins to understand that the battle has already been won. The posture of your life begins to shift from striving to stillness, from panic to peace, and from anxiety to authority. You stop approaching your problems like a victim begging for mercy and start standing like a victor enforcing a divine verdict that's already been declared in the heavens. You are not hoping for the outcome, you are walking in it. There is a confidence that arises in the spirit when the believer realizes that every war, every storm, every mountain has already bowed before the one who called you. This truth does not come from positive thinking or wishful dreaming. It is rooted in spiritual reality, one that says the cross was not just a symbol of suffering, but the declaration of eternal victory. Every chain you are trying to break has already been shattered. Every curse that tried to cling to your name was already nailed to the wood. You are not working to gain the blessing, you are walking from it. This changes how you respond to life's pressures. You no longer allow circumstances to dictate your praise or let setbacks steal your identity. You are anchored in a truth that cannot be shaken by what your eyes see or your ears hear, because your spirit knows something deeper. That is what gives you rest even in chaos, not because the world is quiet, but because your soul is. The kind of rest that comes from understanding that even before the enemy plotted, God had already planned. Before the sickness showed up, healing was spoken. Before the door closed, a better one was constructed. Before the tears touched your face, joy was reserved for you. You are not chasing after solutions. You are aligning yourself with what has already been settled. Fighting from victory is not passive, it is powerful. It means every declaration you make, every prayer you utter, every step you take is not a desperate cry for help, but a bold reminder to the world and to your own soul that you belong to a kingdom that never loses. You start living differently. You praise louder, not because you are ignoring pain, but because you are declaring that pain will not define your end. You worship with hands lifted not just in surrender, but in celebration, because you know who already triumphed on your behalf. You face giants without trembling because you are not facing them alone. The one who already defeated them stands with you, speaks through you, and fights for you. This mindset doesn't exempt you from challenges, but it redefines them. Now every valley is a setup for a testimony. Every storm is an invitation to trust deeper, and every delay is not denial, but divine timing. You realize the fight is not to change God's mind, it's to align yours with His truth. You're not trying to convince heaven to move on your behalf. Heaven already moved. Now it's your turn to move with it, and every time you do, hell trembles because it knows a believer who understands victory is a dangerous one. You can't be manipulated by fear, controlled by doubt, or silenced by discouragement. You have seen too much, survived too much, and believed too deeply to go back now. You've learned how to war from a place of worship, how to battle while still believing, how to stand while still bleeding, and how to hope while still hurting. Faith doesn't make you numb, it makes you unshakable. It doesn't deny the presence of problems, it declares the presence of God in the midst of them. And when you fight from victory, your weapons change. Peace becomes a weapon, joy becomes a statement, rest becomes resistance. Silence becomes power. You no longer need to prove yourself to anyone, because the one who matters most has already approved you. That's why you can walk into rooms not seeking validation, but bringing transformation. You are not trying to be chosen, you already were. You are not begging for favor, it's already on your life. And no amount of resistance can revoke what was written about you before the foundations of the world. When life feels heavy and uncertainty looms, remember this: God has already gone before you. The outcome is not hanging in the balance of your stress, your effort, or your anxiety. It is already secured by the one who sees the end from the beginning. Every tear you've cried, every silent prayer you've whispered, every sleepless night, none of it has gone unnoticed. The battle was never yours to fight alone, and the weight was never yours to carry. Trust doesn't mean you understand the how, but it does mean you believe in the who. Let go of what you're clenching so tightly and lift your eyes higher. God's plan is not delayed. His hand is not weak. His word is not void. You are walking a path already paved with purpose. So rest your heart. Stop worrying. Heaven is already moving on your behalf.